All right, to understand more of what might have happened at that particular moment on the broadcast, I'm joined by former Royal Air Force pilot, Mr. George Bacon. Mr. Bacon, good evening. Namaskar. Thank you very much for speaking with us on Mirror Now. My first question to you, Mr. Bacon, what, in your opinion, could have been the cause of the tragedy, considering that both aircraft were on their standard patterns and there was nothing unusual that was noticed?
You want me to opine roughly what the cause is? Well, that's going to take a while because obviously we need, first of all, evidence, and then secondly, the data from the machines. Now, that's what's going on at the moment. Okay, you mentioned standard flight paths. I'm not so sure that that is a correct assumption. The airliner was, of course, on its usual flight path, or there was a slight change of runway, I understand, before that call, but was clearly at the critical stage of flight, which is landing, and was the least likely to maneuver to avoid any potential conflict. The military helicopter, however, is a much more flexible machine, and whether it was on an assigned corridor, i.e. we don't know yet whether it was assigned by an air traffic controller or not, was at least able to maneuver or stop or go up or down an awful lot more flexibly. So I think the areas that the investigators will need to focus on are, first of all, why were the two aircraft on those assigned flight paths? Because that was being monitored by the air traffic controller at the time. And then secondly, why was the conversation between the air traffic and the Black Hawk crew not fully confirmed? In other words, there was an assumption that the crew could see the other aircraft, but that's all it was at that stage. There was another aircraft taking off at the same time. I'm sure you're aware of that. So there could have been distraction, but because that conversation was not actually completed in full confirmation, and also the fact that the Black Hawk did not take avoiding action to go behind, indicates that there was potentially a breakdown in communication. So that, I think, is going to be where it's all going to happen. And clearly the cockpit voice recorders will have an awful lot to say, particularly from the Black Hawk, assuming that they are still intact. The other important thing to bear in mind, of course, is that it is incredibly busy airspace. I know everybody has said this. But in this case, in addition to the civilian Ronald Reagan airfield, there is Andrews Air Force Base, and there's a considerable number of secure helicopter landing sites around there as well. Now, almost certainly over many decades, there would be what I would refer to as protocols established between the military activity and the commercial activity that's going on. And that would not be unusual. You would do it in your own country, particularly around Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, where certain procedures would be accepted as the norm, and provided they are communicated. So in this case, it is rather strange that the aircraft were clearly observed to be on conflicting flight paths, but no immediate evasive direction was given. So there are those numbers there. So I think the indications I've given you are an examination of how they came to be on those conflicting flight paths, and the second one being the verbal communication between the Black Hawk helicopter and the air trafficker.